Have you ever felt a wave of nausea when you're traveling on a boat, a train, a plane, or a car and thought to yourself, why am I feeling like this and what is happening? Well, you might be experiencing motion sickness. Sometimes you don't even have to be moving. Have you ever been in a 3D movie or a movie with a lot of different motion and thought to yourself, I'm starting to feel a bit nauseous, car sick, even though you're just watching people driving on TV and you're not actually driving in the car yourself? My name is Dr. Anne and I'm going to go through what you need to know about motion sickness, how you prevent it, and what the best treatment methods are to help you with your motion sickness. There's 5 key things to remember. Motion sickness is an unfortunate experience for many people, including car travel, air travel, boat travel, train travel. Lots of different forms of travel can give you motion sickness. As your brain gets different signals from your sensory systems, such as your eyes, your ears, it gets confused and often leads to feelings of nausea, dizziness, vomiting, headaches. It's worse often in children, in pregnant ladies, and it can change as you get older. So each person's symptoms might be different from someone else. Number 4, prevention is often key. One of my self-care tips involving don't look at your iPhone or book for too long when you travel. Make sure you're sitting in the front and looking at the direction of travel. Don't face backwards. And if you can, you might want to consider some peppermint or ginger sweets if this helps you, or an acupuncture pressure band. Number 5, discuss your symptoms with a pharmacist. Work out what's available over the counter for you to try. If that doesn't work or your symptoms are really bothering you, affecting your life, speak to a doctor. We'll be happy to help you. Let's start now with a few fun facts. Did you know that humans are not the only ones who get motion sickness? Your cat, your dog, or even your horse might get motion sickness, and it might be useful to keep that in mind when you're traveling with your pet or doing a long journey, because they can also get similar symptoms to humans. But speaking of travel, you don't have to be moving at all to get motion sickness. Like I mentioned earlier, you can get it when you're watching TV or on a video game, so there's lots of ways of getting motion sickness without actually moving. Another interesting fact is it could have a genetic component. So that means if your parents get motion sickness, you too are more likely to get motion sickness. In this study on twins, they looked at the genetic influences of motion sickness. This study suggested that there's a significant genetic contribution for motion sickness. And secondly, that the heritability of motion sickness is highest in childhood and it improves through puberty and adult years. Motion sickness is an ancient problem. It was written about in the Bible, the Greeks have described it, the Romans have described it, so it's been around for a very long time. And he noted it in sailors who had not adapted to the motion of the sea and often ended up feeling unwell. Back then, ancient Chinese sailors used to stand on one leg and look into the horizon to combat their motion sickness. And then the Egyptians used to lie flat and look up at the sky to again combat their symptoms of nausea. Understanding motion sickness. Motion sickness is essentially a feeling of uneasiness that arises during travel. It can happen by car, boat, plane, or train. It usually happens when there's a disconnection between what your body feels, what your eyes see, and that means your brain is getting conflicting mixed signals that it's having difficulty interpreting, leading to feelings of dizziness, nausea, and sometimes vomiting. Whenever I was doing long road trips with my cousins in India, I noticed that they got terrible motion sickness. Me, my sister, and my parents, we never tended to get any of the symptoms, but I saw my cousins vomiting, having nausea, and I feel terrible for them. And I wonder if we can do something to support them. So in this video, I'm going to go through the top symptoms and treatments. Identifying the symptoms of motion sickness. The primary symptoms of motion sickness tends to be an upset stomach, often dizziness, sweatiness, headaches, nausea, vomiting. These are all common symptoms that you might get. Recognizing the risk factors for motion sickness. While any form of travel can trigger motion sickness, it can also be triggered by amusement rides or children's playground equipment. Children between the ages of 2 and 12 are the most susceptible of getting motion sickness. For people who get motion sickness, prevention is often the best cure, and it can be very helpful in managing your symptoms and helping you to feel your best as you travel. Here are my top tips for preventing motion sickness. When booking a trip, plan ahead. Request a window or wing seat in the airplane. Sit forwards and face the direction of travel, and if you're on a ship, try to get a cabin at water level in the middle or the front of the vessel to avoid as much turbulence as possible. They don't experience the same level of symptoms or any symptoms at all. Get plenty of rest the night before a long journey and avoid excess alcohol. That's because dehydration, headaches and anxiety can all make your symptoms of motion sickness worse. Eat a light meal before you travel, drink plenty of water and avoid too much greasy or spicy food to avoid any unnecessary stomach upset. Stare into the horizon and distract yourself with music. Consider home remedies or alternative therapies. You might want to consider peppermint, ginger. Although the effectiveness is debated, if it works for you, it can be worth a try. Stop for frequent breaks, and in those breaks, make sure you take fresh breaths. Make sure you take a walk around the car or your mode of transport and take lots of deep breaths and even a short walk to stretch your legs. Be aware that your triggers are different to someone else and your body is unique to you. So try to keep in mind what tips work for you and make sure you note them down so that you can remember to do them every time you travel. My last top tip is try to avoid talking about how bad your motion sickness feels. Often if you distract yourself and take your mind off things, your body will focus on other sensations. If you are focusing on your nausea, your dizziness, your vomiting, it's more likely to make you feel worse. How long can your symptoms last? Symptoms of motion sickness can last for a few hours or a few days after the motion has stopped. This condition is called, and it translates to, sickness of disembarkation. This phenomenon is often experienced after a long cruise or sea journey, where some people notice a rocking sensation even after they've returned to stable land. Most people tend to adjust within a few hours or a few days, but for some people it can last longer. Managing motion sickness. There are several medications which are effective at preventing motion sickness. Generally, they're preventative and it's better to take them before you start to travel. Commonly prescribed medications are listed here. Some of these medications can cause drowsiness, so it's important to remember that when you start to take them and make sure you're not driving. You might have heard of motion sickness bands and you're wondering how do they work and are they effective? I'm going to go through what you should know. Motion sickness bands, also known as acupressure bands, work on the principles of acupressure. These bands are designed to put pressure on specific points on your wrist known as the acupuncture point, P6 acupoint, which is located on your inner forearm. To find your pressure point, you can put 3 fingers here and press the tendon just below the 3 fingers. This is called your P6 point. These bands have a small plastic head and they apply continuous pressure to this point, and it's believed that this pressure releases neurotransmitters, which are chemicals your body produces, and therefore leads to you feeling less nausea when you travel. This method is thought to have originated from ancient Chinese medicine, but I'm going to go through 2 studies now for you. In this study here on 90 pregnant women and the effect of acupressure at P6, it found that it was helpful in alleviating nausea and vomiting in women with a condition called hyperemesis gravidarum. The women were divided into 2 groups, some who were given the band and some who didn't have the band. The women with the band noticed that they had less nausea and less vomiting than the group without the band. It also found no side effects, so it could be worth a try. In this second study here, which looked into the effect of the bands on post-operative nausea, this study again found that pressure on the P6 acupressure point had an improvement in levels of nausea and vomiting. My thoughts on these bands: generally they have low side effects and are quite easily available, so it could be worth giving it a go. Which motion sickness treatment is best? Just like your symptoms, the effectiveness of motion sickness medication can vary from person to person. What works best for you might be different from someone else. There's often easily available medication you can get from your pharmacy. What you can get from your pharmacy will vary country to country, so it's important to go there and speak to the pharmacist. The general medications you can get from the pharmacy include tablets and patches. Remember that these aren't suitable for everyone, and you need to check if it's safe for children, or if you're on other medication, or if you're elderly. If your motion sickness is severely affecting you, it's important to speak to a doctor. Often there's additional medications that we can prescribe for you. Some medications we can prescribe include scopolamine. In some countries you need a prescription for this, so make sure you check with your pharmacist or doctor. And this is usually available in patches and tablets. This medication usually needs to be taken around 46 hours before you start your journey, and it can last up to 72 hours. You might need to change your patch or take additional medication. Check which one is right for you. If you take the oral form, you might need to take it around 20 to 30 minutes before you start traveling. Check with the instructions on the packet. Looking at the effectiveness of scopolamine patches, It found that there was a significant reduction in severity of motion sickness, around 60 to 80%. It was thought to be more effective than this one and also had similar results to 0.6 oral of scopolamine. If you decided to use 2 patches instead of 1, it had an increased risk of side effects but with no improved benefit. Some side effects that you might get is a dry mouth, which happened in around 50 to 60% of patients, drowsiness in around 20%, and irritation of the skin in around 10%. The patch was most effective around 8 to 12 hours after application. Make sure you follow the instructions and you put it on with adequate time for it to work before you start to travel. Otherwise, it's just a waste. Ultimately, the best medication for you depends on your body, your response, your age, your health history. So it's important to try different things and work out what works best for you. And if you're not sure, speak to a doctor. When to speak to a doctor? If you've been getting really bad motion sickness, it's putting you off travel, it's making you feel more anxious, it's getting worse, you're not sure if it is motion sickness or something else, or it's really affecting your life, then I would speak to a doctor. Natural methods for motion sickness. As I mentioned earlier, it's been around for a very long time. It's discussed in the Bible and also mentioned by Hippocrates. So there's lots of different methods which have been discussed over time. Methods you might have heard of are ginger. This is a popular natural method for nausea and vomiting, and there's available in capsules, tea, in sweets. It might be worth a try. Peppermint is also thought to reduce nausea and have a calming effect on your stomach. It comes in multiple different forms such as oils, teas, so it might be a case of working out which method works for you. Another method that I think works well is deep breathing. Deep breaths can help reduce symptoms of motion sickness, so try inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth and take long, deep breaths. Please write a comment below on your favorite motion sickness treatments and I'll respond to them. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.